Hey guys, Mr. Nichols here. It's so great to finally be back with you guys. I really appreciate all of your guys' flexibility with everything that's been going on with my surgery and then my recovery. So I hope that you all are doing well and that the last couple weeks have been treating you well. And also that the activities that we did weren't too complicated and that we didn't run into too many issues. And if you did run into any issues, I hope that you reached out to me on Remind. So I wanted to take this time today to talk to you a little bit about our Schoolyard biodiversity activity. So I wanted to start off by just actually talking through a little bit of what the Enter the Biosphere was for today. So today we should be completing the Enter the Biosphere number 17. So if you haven't done that yet, please pause the video and then go back and go ahead and do that. Part of what I wanted to do here when we're talking about biodiversity is really help you draw a connection with these different environments. So if we look at this first environment that I asked you to kind of describe what this image of this environment makes you feel. If we look here, we can see a wide variety of different fish species. We have coral, we have a sea turtle. So it looks like a pretty vibrant environment, right? So it looks like there's lots of life and it appears to be flourishing. A lot of these organisms look very healthy. So this is what we would describe as a very biodiverse area, or basically an environment that is pretty healthy by comparison to other environments. So now let's look at something that is not very diverse here. So this is an example of a palm oil field where we have rows and rows across thousands of acres of these palm trees. And basically we're able to create a product called palm oil from these trees. So what's happened in a lot of the areas where they're farming for this palm oil is they've stripped out a lot of the other organisms that live in that area, a lot of the trees and bushes and shrubs and grasses that would have grown in this area and competed with this palm oil trees. So if we look here, this area would be an example of a place that is not biodiverse. So there's just the same plant over and over and over again. Now I imagine that when most of you answered these questions, you might have said that, oh, this environment looks healthy. Look at all these trees. They're green and they look like they're growing well. But the question I'd like to ask you is what happens when there's a beetle that is really well adapted for eating these palm tree leaves? Or if there's a bacteria or a virus that comes into this population and is really good at attacking them, it's going to wipe out the entire field because they're all very similar. Diversity makes environments much more stable because they can withstand disease, they can withstand changes in predation or predators that are present much better than if we were having just one of the same thing. So this is kind of our topic that we're going to be exploring today. Now, you should have gone through and already completed the Calculating Biodiversity online activity from yesterday. If you haven't already done that, it's assignment 1.10, so 1.10. Definitely make sure you do that first because that's looking at some practice with calculating biodiversity. But here we're really going to be applying what we learned there. So let's take a look at our document here. So spoiler alert, for those of you that were, well, for my students that were in person, we actually physically went outside of the building to measure the biodiversity of our local environment here in Littleton, Colorado. So obviously you will not be able to come to the school and take the exact same measurements that we did. So we've got a couple options as far as what we can do to kind of give you the same experience, but just slightly different. So first thing we need to talk about is the diversity index. So we should, by this point, know how to calculate the diversity index from our last activity. But if you need a quick little refresher, so we calculate the diversity index by taking the total number of species that are in our particular area, our particular sample that we're looking at. And then we're going to divide that by the total number of plants and animals that are found in that particular area. So essentially what we're going to be looking at, because it makes life a lot simpler, is we're going to be looking at grass species. Now I know that might not sound super exciting, but there's actually a wide variety of different types of grasses that can survive in an area. And especially in this area, oftentimes we think of typical or traditional, just general grasses. But there's a variety of different species that we can see. And I guarantee you've seen at least a couple of these species before. So I've provided some pictures of the area where we took our photos. So you're welcome to either use the photos from this document. You could just use these, or you can feel free to go into your backyard or go park nearby, and you can take these exact same measurements. Obviously, you won't have these little yellow rings, but you could use maybe a string or a small hula hoop or something. If you can have anything that has a circle around it, you could feel free to use that as well. Okay, so this is the area that we went as a class in person to go and analyze this year. So this is out by the soccer fields back behind the building. This is kind of near the track as well, the new track. Okay, so here are some examples of some of the sections of the grass that we sampled. So now, one thing that I do want to let you know is that part of this is going to be a little difficult, especially since if you just use these pictures, if you don't want to go into your backyard and do this or a park, it's a little hard, to be frank, because it's easier if you can go in and feel where the bundle of grasses are. So usually with grass, there's going to be, yes, there's a lot of leaves that come up, but there should be one central portion, one central area where most of those little grass leaves branch off from. Okay, and if you actually go and you can physically grab them and feel that bundle, that would be one. I want to be very clear. The expectation is not to count the blades of grass. That would be ridiculous. So in these images, if you're just going to use those, my best recommendation would be to look for some of the characteristics, things like leaves, things like the stem of a particular type of grass, in order to try and identify it. And really, this is just an estimation. So if you really can't tell, just give it your best guess. And as long as we're relatively close, your data should still come out just fine. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at an example. Now, when you're looking at these pictures, especially, I would recommend just trying to do one of the pictures, even if you want to go into your backyard or a park. So you're going to want to zoom in. So I'd recommend just clicking on the zoom button and taking it all the way up to 200%. That's going to make it a little bit easier for you to see. And I know the pictures get a little grainy as you zoom in, but unfortunately, we have to be kind of flexible with that. Okay, so now, obviously, looking at this without any prior knowledge, it's going to be pretty hard to identify these different species. So what I've provided for you, if you scroll all the way down, are going to be a little reference sheet. So here are a bunch of sample images from an app called iNaturalist, which you're welcome to use if you'd like. So, and this is going to be more if you go and do it in person, not so much if you're looking at the pictures. But it's a really cool app. If you want to download it, it's free. Make sure you do the iNaturalist Seek app. So I actually have that in the instructions up here, right here. So the Seek iNaturalist app. You don't want just the normal iNaturalist app, but you don't have to do that, obviously, if you don't want to. So I provided these pictures here. So again, the part we really want to focus in on are the blades of grass, or the leaves here. So if you really aren't sure kind of the general typical order, which we haven't really talked about what that term means, but it's a way of categorizing organisms. If you find grass that kind of looks like this, so just your typical kind of lawn grass that you would have in your front yard that most of your lawn is mostly composed of, we'll just call it general grasses. Now, as you'll see with these pictures, and if you were to go out in your yard and take a look, chances are you're not just going to see this type of grass. chances are you'll see some with varied leaf patterns. So let's just kind of talk about each of these real quickly here. So we've got the common storkbill. So these ones have kind of like serrated, obviously they're not sharp, but they look like they have kind of beveled edges. That one's pretty easy to identify here. The amaranths, these are going to have kind of almost, they look like little fluffy kind of sections along their stems, and they're going to have somewhat rounded leaves. Now, unfortunately, this picture that I took, which I shouldn't say I took it, Mrs. Gallagher took it, has these leaves are kind of wilted. So these are very rounded leaves, though. So that's something that's very characteristic of the amaranths. Okay, dandelions, I think we all are pretty comfortable with what dandelions are. You've probably seen them before. So usually this body right here, so the fluffy part that you usually blow, that's going to be pretty easy to identify. So malva are going to be pretty broad leaves, so they are going to be slightly serrated, kind of similar to the stork's bill up here. But if we look here, they're much larger, they're much wider. Okay. Bindweeds. So bindweeds are going to be what we call more broad leaves. So if we look, they kind of have this almost pointed shape at the end of them. Some of them oftentimes, at least where we were looking at them, because they get cut by lawnmowers and things like that, they were kind of chopped into a couple pieces. But if we look at them here, you can see that they're kind of broad. They're almost like triangular shaped a little bit, if it's an elongated triangle here. So those are bindweeds. Okay, foxtails and bristlegrass, if you have this characteristic, almost looks like a little cattail. A little structure here, that's going to be a foxtail and bristlegrass. Purslanes are pretty easy to find. They're going to have a very thick, waxy stem. So that's pretty clear, and they'll have this like red, pinkish color here. So docks, these are going to have really long, serrated, and when I say serrated, I just mean that the edges are bumpy, serrated leaves here. And then finally, we have love grasses. So love grasses are going to have kind of these, they almost look like grain. So small little grains there. To be honest, I had a hard time finding too many of these out in our environment here, but they might be in your backyard or at the park. Okay, so that's all of our different species here that we can be trying to identify. These are most of the common ones in our area. So again, we've got the general grasses here. You can just call them grass, just kind of like your typical lawn grass there. So let's go ahead and go back and look and see what we're trying to do. So again, what we're trying to do is we're going to go take our information from those references. We're going to look at our image and try and identify how many grass species we have in there, and then how many of each grass species we have. So I'd like to go through probably this first one, which I'd like to go through this one because it's a little bit more diverse. So if we look here, okay, we want to try and look for the clumps of grass. So as we mentioned, when grass expands, it starts in one part, in one point, and then it spreads out to multiple different points. So we're looking for that branching off point in the middle. Now it's going to be kind of hard here, to be frank. So all we're really doing specifically for the typical grass species is we're just going to be looking for clumps. So our general grass here, this one, we could probably say would be, there looks like there's a clump about here, looks like there's a clump about here, so that's 2. Looks like we've got another clump around here. This one looks like it has some leaves on it, so we'll come back to it. Looks like there's another clump right here, so that's 4. There's another clump right here, that's 5. And looks like there's, yep, it looks like there's another one in the middle here, so that's 6. And I think we could probably say there's one more here, so that'll be 7. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go down to this document then. So we'll put grasses, So that's our general kind of category. And we had 7 of them. Okay. All right, so scrolling up back to our image here. So now we should look at the ones that are that have leaves that are a little bit easier for us to identify. So if we look here, although it's a little smaller, so it might be a younger one here, we can see that really clear pinkish thick stem here. So that's going to be an example of, scroll all the way back down, of a purslane. Okay, and it looks like, as you can see with that image down below, they kind of branch off, just like all grasses do. And to be honest, it kind of looks like there's just one. So it looks like it's branching off of this point right here. So we're going to say that there was one purslane. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and look back here. So looks like let's look at this one here. Which actually, I think it's that might be a leaf, but no, that's okay. All right, so let's go back and look at this one right here. So if we look here, we can see a pretty clear leaf right there. Okay, so if we look, that leaf looks pretty long. Okay, and it doesn't really look that serrated. So if we go back, which of these has long leaves that are not serrated? Okay, amaranths are pretty round. Okay, malva are serrated, but they're pretty round. And if we look here, bindweeds are not serrated, and they're pretty long. So that's going to be an example of a bindweed. So we can see that right there, pretty clear, that's a long leaf. Now also, if we look up here, and I think I categorized this one originally as typical grass, but looking at it again, I think I can see a leaf right here that I missed. So if we look there, that doesn't really look that serrated. Okay, so I think that this one might actually be a bindweed as well. So I'm going to go ahead and update that, and now we have 2 of those bindweeds there. Okay. Oops, sorry, I forgot to put 1 for our purslane. Okay, so we had 2 of those bindweeds, and we are going to get rid of 1 of those grasses, because I think I mischaracterized that one there because I didn't quite catch that leaf. All right, so now if we look there, it seems like that's pretty much all of the leaves except for this section down here. So if we look here, these leaves look pretty star-shaped almost. So the edges do look like they're kind of serrated. And if you look there, you can kind of see that they've kind of got those bumps on the edge. They're not really smooth and round. So I would say that those are most likely going to be our malva. Okay, so the edges are kind of rough and they're kind of cutting in and out. So that would be an example of a malva. Okay. All right. And let's see, sorry, I didn't count to see how many there are. And these 2 are right next to each other. I would bet that those are from the same set of grasses here. So because of how tightly clumped they are together. Okay. So I would say that that is just 1. Okay. All right. So that is how we're going to collect our data here. Now, again, when we're calculating the diversity index, which I would like to show you one of these as an example, you're going to take the total number of species that you had. So how many species did we have here? We had 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we're going to do 4 divided by the total number of organisms that we had. So how many plants of that species that we had? So we had 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 plus 2 is 9. 9 plus 1 is 10. So we're going to do 4 divided by 10. And if we plug that in there, we want our answer to be a decimal value. So 0.4 there. Okay. Okay. So that's how we're going to walk through this first section here. To be honest, I'm going to leave it up to you to come up with your sample 1 and your sample 2. So you may not just copy what I did here. So you may not use this image right here because we just did this one together. That was our example. So you're welcome to choose this one, or this one. Or again, you can go outside, and as long as you create about an 18-inch diameter ring, you can do the exact same thing that we did here in your own backyard or in a nearby park. So you'll need to complete both sample 1 here and sample 2, and then you'll need to calculate the average of both of your answers here. So here my first one was 0.4, and then we'll need to use the scale for biodiversity up here to determine what the range was for our particular area. Okay, all right, so if we look down here, you'll go ahead and just answer these questions to the best of your ability. Really, these are just kind of brainstorming questions. What do you think could increase biodiversity, and what do you think could decrease it? So I hope that this tutorial was helpful, and I hope that you guys enjoy this activity. Really, we just wanted to get you guys outside and really just collecting some data. So especially with kind of the way things have been lately, it's really important to make sure that we can give you guys an opportunity to get outside and actually do some science. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to help you. Definitely Remind is going to be the best way to get a hold of me. So if you need to ask me any questions, feel free to do that. I do also want to let you know with our modified schedule next week. So Monday is going to be a 100% remote blue day. So all of your activities will be all of your activities will be remote. And then for us, we'll have class on Tuesday, and it'll be 100% remote. To be honest, I'm probably going to give you guys a very small assignment, and I really just want you guys to be able to use next week, since the schedule is a little bit different. It's really an opportunity to just kind of catch up and make up some of your missing assignments that we've had, especially with having me enter a lot of grades into the grade book today. It's clear that quite a few of us have some missing assignments that we need to get to. So I want to give you guys some time to do that, give you guys a chance to breathe, especially since I've been out for a couple weeks. I want you guys to have that opportunity to just kind of tie up all your loose ends before we march into the second half of this semester. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I hope you guys have fun with this activity, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. So thank you so much for stopping by, and take care.